well done. It's a good race.
Yeah, pace was strong. It's a shame there was a bit more fighting than what I would have hoped.
Are we seeing the start of an internal war at Ferrari between Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc? Because what happened in the sprint race in China was not just a normal fight between teammates. It was a moment full of tension, angry radios, and uncomfortable glances inside the red garage. Leclerc exploding on the radio after losing performance in the middle of the straight, Hamilton ahead marking territory, and Ferrari again at the center of the controversy. It all happened in a matter of seconds, but it revealed something much bigger. A rivalry that is beginning to heat up within the Scuderia. Because when two drivers who want to lead the same project find themselves fighting wheel to wheel, and the car also starts to fail at just the worst moment, the result can only be one: frustration, tension, and a battle that is just beginning. The sprint race in Shanghai began with a tension that could be felt even before the lights went out. Ferrari had its two drivers well positioned on the grid, but the atmosphere within the team was already marked by what had happened in qualifying. Charles Leclerc arrived at the start still upset by the problem in the energy display that had caused him to lose several tenths on the straight during his decisive lap. Lewis Hamilton, on the other hand, started with the feeling of having done the job well, with a solid lap that had placed him ahead inside the red garage. That internal difference, small in terms of time but enormous in psychological terms, was going to play a key role in what was about to happen. When the sprint began, the first meters were intense for the entire front group. Shanghai is a circuit that offers overtaking opportunities thanks to its long straight and the heavy braking that precedes it, and from the start the drivers knew they had to be aggressive if they wanted to gain positions. In the midst of that initial chaos, Ferrari had a delicate situation. Two extremely competitive drivers riding close to each other, both trying to advance without wasting time in internal fights that could compromise the race. However, when two championship-minded drivers share the track, asking them not to compete against each other is often easier said than done. In the first rounds the fight began to take shape. Leclerc, determined to recover the ground lost after qualifying, began to apply intense pressure. He knew that his pace was enough to fight further ahead and that every lap stuck behind other cars meant losing opportunities. Little by little he approached the area where Hamilton was rolling, and at that moment the situation inside Ferrari began to become much more uncomfortable. Because it was no longer just about gaining positions against other teams. Now the battle moved directly within the garage itself. The duel between the two was inevitable. On a circuit like Shanghai, where DRS and top speed play such an important role, it only takes a few meters of advantage or disadvantage to completely change the dynamics between two cars. Leclerc tried to take advantage of every opportunity to get closer, while Hamilton defended his position with the experience of someone who has spent his entire career competing in the most intense fights in Formula One. The difference in styles was also evident. The Monegasque pushing aggressively in search of an opportunity, the Briton managing the situation coolly and calculating every move. Inside the Ferrari wall the tension grew with each lap. The team knew full well that an overly aggressive fight between their own drivers could end up costing them valuable points. But at the same time they also knew that neither of them was going to lift their foot easily. Hamilton is at Ferrari to win and show that he can still lead a championship project. Leclerc, for his part, feels that this team has been his home for years and that he is not willing to lose his status within the team. That mix of ambition and pride is exactly what makes battles between teammates so explosive. Each turn increased the pressure. Leclerc was still trying to get close enough to launch a clear attack, while Hamilton defended his position while maintaining a constant pace. The fight was fair, but the tension was evident. It was not simply a fight for one more place in the sprint classification. It was also a symbolic fight to show who had control within the team. At Ferrari, those types of internal messages can be as important as the final result of a race. What made the moment even more delicate was the context surrounding the team. Ferrari had been drawing criticism for seasons for strategic errors and operational failures at key moments. Every complicated situation on the court is immediately amplified because there is the constant feeling that the team is still trying to prove that it can execute everything perfectly. Therefore, when Hamilton and Leclerc began to directly fight each other in the sprint, many within the paddock began to closely observe what was happening. They knew that any small incident could become a much bigger problem for the Italian team. As the race progressed, the fight continued. There was no spectacular crash or desperate maneuver that ended in disaster, but the intensity of the duel made it clear that the competitive relationship between both drivers is entering a new phase. It is no longer just about adapting to coexistence within the same team. Now each session, each classification, and each race become a stage where both seek to demonstrate that they can be the reference within Ferrari. And so, the sprint in China ended up leaving something much more interesting than a simple result on the table. It left the feeling that a rivalry is brewing within Ferrari that could mark the entire season. Hamilton is starting to establish himself within the team, while Leclerc is fighting to maintain his place as project leader. When two drivers of this caliber share the same competitive car, the question is no longer if there will be tension, but when it will explode again on the track. The sprint race was over, but the real story was just beginning to unfold inside the Ferrari garage. When the cars returned to the pit lane and the engineers began to review data, temperatures, and telemetry, the tension accumulated during the race was still floating in the air. Because although the fight between Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc had not ended in contact or a serious incident, it had left something much more important revealed. Within Ferrari there is now a real rivalry that can set the course of the entire season. For Hamilton, the sprint result represented more than just a good performance on a difficult weekend. It was confirmation that his adaptation to the team was progressing much faster than many imagined. After arriving at Ferrari with enormous expectations and also with many external doubts about how he would fit within the Italian structure, the Briton was beginning to show that he still has the ability to make a difference within a top-level team. Being ahead of Leclerc, especially on a demanding circuit like Shanghai, had an important symbolic meaning within the garage. But on the other side of the story was Charles Leclerc, and for him the feeling was completely different. The Monegasque had been the visible face of the Ferrari project for years, the driver in whom the team had placed much of its hopes to fight for championships again. Now, with Hamilton within the team and beginning to show competitive performance, the internal dynamics were inevitably beginning to change. Each direct comparison between the two becomes a kind of thermometer that measures who really has control within the project. Leclerc's frustration did not come only from the battle on the track. It was also deeply scarred by the technical problem it had suffered during sprint qualifying, when the car's hybrid system did not properly deploy energy on the long straight of the Shanghai circuit. That failure had cost him several tenths just on the lap that defined his position on the grid, something extremely difficult to accept for a driver who knows he has the talent to fight further ahead. In a sport where every thousandth counts, losing time due to a technical problem at the decisive moment can generate a feeling of helplessness that is very difficult to digest. Inside Ferrari, engineers were trying to analyze the situation coolly. From a technical point of view, the energy deployment problem was considered a specific anomaly within an extremely complex hybrid system. However, the real challenge for the team was not only to resolve that technical failure, but to correctly manage the relationship between two drivers who are used to fighting for the number one position within any team in which they compete. The sprint in China left much more than a simple result on the table. What we saw in Shanghai was a small window into what could become one of the most intense stories of the entire season. The internal rivalry between Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc within Ferrari. Two drivers with a champion mentality, two different styles, and the same objective that inevitably puts them face to face every time they go out on the track. On the one hand there is Hamilton, a driver who comes to Ferrari with the mission of returning the team to the top and showing that he can still lead a winning project. His experience, his ability to manage races, and his competitive mentality make him a real threat within the team itself. Every time he manages to get ahead of his teammate, he sends a clear message. He has not come to Maranello to be part of the process, but to be the protagonist. On the other side is Leclerc, the driver who for years has represented the future of Ferrari. For him, this team is not simply another team in his career, it is the project that he has built together with the team for entire seasons. Seeing how he now shares that role with one of the most successful drivers in history inevitably generates pressure, especially when technical problems appear like the one he suffered in the sprint classification with the car's energy deployment. Ferrari then finds itself facing a situation that is as exciting as it is dangerous. Having two drivers capable of fighting for victory is a huge competitive advantage, but it can also become a problem if internal rivalry begins to overtake the team's control. The history of Formula One has shown many times that when two great talents share a garage without a clear hierarchy, tensions can grow to directly affect the team's performance. And that is precisely what makes what happened in the China sprint so interesting. It was not a spectacular crash or a gigantic controversy, but it was a moment that revealed something that can grow with the passing of the races, the silent fight for leadership within Ferrari. A battle that is fought in each classification, in each strategy, and in each overtaking between teammates. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.